There's nothing from the park at all. No one saw a thing, which is a little odd. Patel sat back, twiddling a pen between her fingers. So should I keep going? Because there's more bad news. I ran my hand over my mouth and jaw, an old tic of mine. You're just full of sunshine today, aren't you? Technically, this is Siegel's piece, so you can't hold it against me, she said. I liked working with Patel. She seemed to keep her sense of humor no matter what, and the humor was dark and deep. Go ahead, I said. I can take whatever you're dishing out here. It's about this Patriot moniker they used in one of the emails. Ever since True Press ran the story, the name seems to have stuck in a really scary way. We've got people at both ends of the spectrum foaming at the mouth, from the radical anti-globalization types all the way over to the hard-right survivalists. The Bureau's already working up contingencies about the possibility of tribute killings. She ran a simple open-source search on her laptop. Less than a minute later, I was looking through pages of results. Websites, blogs, vlogs, chat rooms, mainstream commentary, fringe press, all of it giving credence to the supposed patriotism behind these sniper murders. Best way to stir the crazy pot, she said over my shoulder. Wrap your dogma in an American flag and wait to see who bites. Like I said, scary. Around 7:30, Patel and I finally got up to go. As we did, though, she turned away from the door and toward me. The sudden look in her eyes was all but unmistakable, and it was scary in a whole other way. Have you ever had homemade chana masala? She asked. Still, I didn't want to be too presumptuous. Homemade? Never. Because I'm a pretty good cook, despite appearances. She gestured at her nondescript gray slacks and white blouse. I think everyone here assumes I'm just some wonk who goes home to her 7 cats and a lean cuisine every night. I doubt that, I said. Patel had always struck me as a classic diamond in the rough. She was the kind of woman who arrived at the office Christmas party all done up and dropped every jaw in the room. So my car's in the shop, she went on. I was thinking if you could save me the cab fare home, I'd pay you back with dinner. Then she really threw me. Patel reached over and put her hand on top of mine. Maybe even dessert, she said. What do you think? I think you're full of surprises, I said, and we both laughed, a little nervously. Listen, Anjali. Oh, God, her hand fell away. It's never good when they start with your name. I'm in a relationship. We're getting married. She nodded and started gathering up her stuff. You know what they say about all the good men, right? Taken or gay. In fact, that's going to be the title of my memoir. Think it will sell? This time we laughed for real. It cut right through the tension, which I think was nice for both of us. I appreciate the invitation, I said, and I meant it. If this was some other time in my life, I definitely would have been eating chana masala that night, maybe dessert too. And I can still give you that ride if you want. Don't worry about it. She tucked her laptop under her arm and held the conference room door for me. If I'm not cooking, I'm going to stick around here and get some more work done. Meanwhile, if you wouldn't mind forgetting we ever had this conversation. What conversation? I gave her my best wide-eyed innocent face on the way out. I can't remember a thing.
It was just short of midnight when Agent Anjali Patel stepped out to the curb on E Street in front of the Hoover building, craning her neck searching for a cab. As soon as he saw her, Max Siegel pulled around the corner and lowered the passenger side window. "Someone call for a taxi?" She gave him a nice view of cleavage as she bent down to see who it was. "Max, what are you doing here? It's late." "Sorry about earlier," he said. "Had to run out unexpectedly. I just came back from my car, but maybe I could give you a ride and you can fill me in." Her glance up the street said everything. Not a cab in sight. Not much traffic at all. Max Siegel's co-workers seemed to prefer him at a distance, which was exactly according to plan. Distance afforded him the privacy he needed, and could always be broached if and when he wanted it to be, like right now. "Come on," he said. "I won't bite. I won't even talk about Cross behind his back. Promise." Sure," she said with a practiced smile, and got in. Her perfume was lemony, he noticed, or maybe it was her shampoo. Nice, anyway. feminine. She gave him an address in Shaw. Then she proceeded to chatter on about the case, making sure to fill up any spaces that might otherwise have been left open to the awkwardness of small talk between them. Siegel drove fast, goosing the yellow lights where he could. He hadn't been with a woman since the real estate agent, and damned if he wasn't getting a little hard just thinking about her. When he turned onto her block, he mashed the gas pedal once more and then coasted to a stop in front of a dark storefront just past her yellow brick townhome. "Hey, that was it," she said, looking back. "You missed my place." Kyle looked back, too. The block was still clear of any traffic or pedestrians. "Oops, sorry, my fault." "All right, well." Her fingers were already on the door handle. "Thanks for the ride." "That's it?" he said. "Pardon? I don't think I follow." "See, this is the part where you offer to cook dinner for me," he said. Her face fell. She squinted at him in the dark, probably not ready to believe this was anything more than a weird coincidence. "I'm not much of a cook, Max." "Oh, I don't know about that," he said. "Ever seen one of these before?" He reached into his breast pocket and took out a small black box no bigger than a lighter. "It's one of those GSM ultra-miniature transmitters. You can stick them practically anywhere." Patel gave the thing a cursory glance. "Yeah?" she said. Her discomfort and her attempt to hide it were absolutely delicious. "Let's just say I made the meeting between you and Cross after all." "You bugged our meeting? Jesus, Max, why the hell would you do something like that?" "That's your first good question," he said. "How much time do you have for an answer?" But before she could say a word, he put a hand to her lips. "Wait, I'll tell you myself. You have no time at all." The ice pick, his old favorite, was up and through her larynx before Patel could even scream. Still, her jaw dropped silently open with the effort. He was on her now, his mouth covering hers, his hand over her nose, a literal kiss of death. But just an ordinary kiss between two lovers in a car to anyone who might have glanced out his window. Her strength, her desire to live, were nothing compared to his. Even the blood loss was minimal. Patel had been too polite to ask about the plastic seat covers in the car, or the raincoat Max Siegel was wearing on this dry night. Once she'd stopped moving altogether, his excitement only grew. He would have loved to climb into the back seat with her while her lips were still warm and her belly still so soft to the touch. He wanted to be inside her right now. Hell, he owned her. But it would have been a foolish risk, and an unnecessary one at that. He had decided hours ago that tonight was going to be an exception to the usual rules. He'd earned it, after all, and this game was his to change. In fact, there were a lot of changes just around the corner. But first, Anjali Patel was coming home with him for a sleepover.
Book 3. Multiplicity. Samson knew I was usually awake by 5 or even earlier, but it wouldn't have made a difference today. I could tell he was already at work from the street sounds in the background and the tension in his voice. "I need a favor, Alex, maybe a big one." "Go ahead," I said. "I'm listening." "We've got a homicide in Franklin Square, a John Doe. It looks a lot like that freaky one I had before, over in Washington Circle." "With the numbers?" "That's the one. Any chance I can get you over here for a consult before things heat up too much?" "I'm on my way. John and I never keep track of who owes how many favors to who. Our unwritten rule is, if you need me, I'm there. But make sure you need me." A few minutes later, I was knotting my tie on the way down the back stairs toward the garage. It was practically still dark out, but light enough to show a mass of slate-gray nothingness overhead, cloudy with a chance of a shitstorm. Based on what I remembered of Sampson's earlier case, this was exactly the kind of thing MPD could not afford to be investigating right now. Months ago, a young homeless man had been found beaten to death with a series of numbers carved carefully across his forehead. It probably would have hit every headline inside the Beltway if the poor man hadn't been a street junkie. Even at the department, the case hadn't generated much heat, which wasn't exactly fair, but you could drive yourself crazy over fair in this capital city of ours. Now it had happened again. This was a whole new ballgame. With the sniper case raging, MPD brass were going to have a hair trigger on anything even remotely sensitive. They want to flip this thing up to Major Case Squad before the morning was out. I figured that was why John called. If the case got transferred to my unit, I could say I was already consulting on it, asked to take the lead, and then put Sampson back in charge. Just our version of creative accounting. And God knows, it wouldn't have been the first time. The numbers killer. Jesus, God. Not now. When I got to Franklin Square, the entrances were already cordoned off. Additional units were parked on the longer K and I Street sides of the rectangular park, although the action seemed to be just off 13th, where Sampson was right now waving me over. "Sugar," he said when I came up close to him, "you're a lifesaver. I know the timing sucks. Let's go take a look." 2 crime scene techs in blue windbreakers were working inside the tape line, along with a medical examiner whom I easily recognized from behind. Porter Henning's unofficial nickname is Portly, and widthwise he makes Man Mountain Sampson look practically dainty. I've never been sure how Porter squeezes into some of those tighter crime scenes, but he's also one of the most insightful MEs I've worked with. "Alex Cross, gracing us with your presence," he said as I walked up. "Blame this guy," I thumbed at Sampson, but then stopped short when I saw the victim. People say the extreme stuff is my specialty, which it kind of is, but there's no getting used to human mutilation. The victim had been left face up in a clump of bushes. The multiple layers of dirty clothes marked him as homeless, maybe even someone who slept right there in the park. And while there were signs of a severe beating, it was the numbers carved into his forehead that made the biggest impression. As in the previous murder, it was almost too bizarre. 2 raised to the 30,402,457th power. -1. Are those the same numbers as the last time? I asked. Similar, Sampson told me, but no, not the same. And we don't know who the victim is. John shook his head. I've got guys asking around, but most of the bench crashers made themselves scarce as soon as we showed up. It's not exactly a trust fest around here, you know? I knew. This was part of what made homeless deaths so hard to trace. There's also the shelter just a few blocks up on 13th Street, John went on. I'm going to head up there after this, see if anyone knows anything about this man. What else? I asked. Porter, you find out anything yet? Yeah, found out I'm not getting any younger. Other than that, I'd say the cause of death is tension pneumothorax, although the first strikes were probably here, and here. He pointed at the crushed side of the dead man's head, where a pink ooze had filled his ear. Basal skull fracture, jawbone, zygomatic arch, the whole frickin' works. If there's any silver lining, the poor guy was probably out cold when it happened. There's track marks all over him. All just like the last time, Sampson said. Has to be the same perp. What about the cutting on the forehead? It was the cleanest knife work I'd ever seen. The digits were easily readable, the cuts shallow and precise. Any initial thoughts about the cuts, Porter? This is nothing, he said. Check out the real masterpiece. He reached down and rolled the young man onto his side, then lifted up the back of his shirt. A complex math equation covered the whole area from his waistband to his shoulder blades. You gotta be kidding. I'd never seen anything like it. Not in this context, anyway. Sampson motioned the scene photographer over to get a shot. This is new, John said. The last numbers were just on the face. Makes me wonder if our guy's been practicing. Maybe other bodies we haven't found. Well, he definitely wanted you to see this one, Porter told us. That's the other thing. There's not near enough blood here for the amount of blunt force trauma. Someone pounded this kid, then brought him here, and then did the fancy knife work. The photographer let out a snatch of the Twilight Zone theme before Sampson stared him down. Sorry, man, but damn, I'm glad I don't have your jobs today. Him and everyone else. So the question is, why bring him here? Sampson said. What's he trying to say to us, to whoever? Porter shrugged. Anyone speak math?